And welcome back to The Word in the Works, TWTW. I'm joined by Pastor Jason Goodham, and we are looking at Volume 3, Chapter 1. And Volume 3, Chapter 1 is kind of a long chapter. It picks up where we left off last time. So Frankenstein has resolved he will create this other creature for the monster as a companion. And it kind of takes us down the path of him getting to the place where this might be able to happen. And kind of a long winding chapter that begins with him delaying, but also him delaying the marriage to Elizabeth. And I think this is an interesting thing to explore, because I think what he's doing is his past sin is keeping him from the vocation that he has been given as being husband for this woman. And I know you love vocation.
Yeah, and it's
so I'll let you go off on
vocation. Yeah, it's every selfish act that Victor does in this book. He wants to make it seem unselfish, but he's never actually forced or seen loving one of his neighbors. I think he thinks he's loving his neighbors, but he's actually not doing that.
Yeah. No, it's selfish. It's selfishness. And he couches it as unselfishness. But really, he's doing it.
Yeah, it's.
Go ahead.
I think I hesitate to do this because this might actually just be a Lutheran reflex. It might be one of those things where if I'm holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
But you almost see a sort of Reformation monasticism in Victor, where he's convinced himself that he's actually a benefit to society, but he's withdrawing himself from all of the vocations that would, in fact, have made him useful.
Right. And beneficial to other people. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So instead, he ends up inflicting pain upon everybody else because of his inability to deal with his past sins, his refusal to deal with them. And he fails to do what he ought to do.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah. So he he wants to put this off. Okay, I've just got to put to bed dealing with this monster. Once I've done that, now I can get on with married life and everything will be wonderful. It's kind of the same reasoning that the monster has, isn't it?
It's exactly the same reasoning. It's this one thing I have to do, and then I will be happy.
Yep.
And yeah, it's remarkable. We were talking before we started recording. It is remarkable how in Victor's life, every one of the people who love him somehow stands in direct contrast to his identity. And the only one who ever resembles Victor in this book is the monster, is the creature. And the point of the book is so that the narrator of the book would see this and not become like Victor.
So he basically comes up with this scheme that he tells to his father of, I have to go to England to do this thing. And once I'm done with that, I'll come back and I'll marry Elizabeth and everything will be great. And really the reason he decides to do this is he wants to buy time to fulfill his promise to the monster. And so he thinks that this is a good plan. I can go off into isolation, right, away from all of the people that love me, and there I'll be able to accomplish this thing. Now, that's what he decides to do, but who ends up accompanying him is
Clerval,
his best friend, right?
Yep. And Clerval, so, his best friend, comes with and spoils everything.
yeah. I can't do this thing because he's there all the time. Yeah, so he can't work on his creation because Clerval's there, and he doesn't want him to know about this problem. He doesn't want him to know about this super secret bad thing in his past. And so again, instead of confessing, he ends up hiding, which leads to manipulating.
Yeah, and the whole thing is born out of that refusal to confess to the people who love him the most.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
he doesn't, it never once occurs to him to say, you know what, guys, uh I got a little bit creepy when I was it Ingolstadt is where he was in college, and I
I was in
kind
a
of sort of
dark place,
accidentally
guys.
kind of accidentally created a monster, and well, I'm
Yeah.
kind of dealing with he
Right?
doesn't go there.
No.
And the whole point is every sin makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And his constant refusal to confess, and then he's heaping all of these other things on top of it. It just it snowballs big time. So Clerval is a fascinating guy because they go to England, and they're on this trip, and he's seeing all of the beauty of nature, and he's taking it in, and he is as happy as he can be. And Dr. Frankenstein is seeing all of this, and he's like, yeah, it's beautiful, but I got this thing hanging over my head. I can't see any true beauty in any of these things. And all he can think is something bad's going to happen because of this past sin that I've committed, because this monster's still out there. And I don't even really want to be with Clerval because I feel like I might be putting him at risk. But then I can't let him be alone either, because then if he's alone, he might be at risk. Maybe I can protect him from the monster. Yeah, that is really within your capabilities, isn't Dr. Frankenstein?
It,
Um, but he doesn't even know what to do with having a friend there with him.
yeah.
He can't make heads or tails of anything.
Well, and he doesn't know what a friend is, and this is the problem, right? In that, in the
Mm,
twistedness of his sin, he, is like, I can't tell Clerval because he would think less of me.
mm-hmm.
And for even now, everything for Frankenstein comes down to it's the appearance uh of goodness for the point of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the way, I mean, almost in the way that Frankenstein relates back how Clerval is, you see that for him it's that matter of respect. And now he does list Clerval's virtues quite a bit,
Right.
but it's almost in the most materialistic, vanilla, sterile sense that he addresses him. Even if it is poetry, it's, he goes on to call him, what is it? It says that overflowed with ardent affections, and his friendship was that devoted and wondrous nature that the worldly minded think us to look for. He can't say, Clerval is a good friend. It's
Right.
that he's
He
a
is.
he's a he's a, like a by the book friend
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And it's Clerval is a real person, and Frankenstein is a shell of a human. And the line that sticks out to me in this whole chapter more than anything else is Clerval joins up with Frankenstein, and this is like almost halfway through the chapter. He says, "This is what it is to live," he cried. "How I enjoy existence. But you, my dear Frankenstein, wherefore are you desponding and sorrowful?"
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, at that point in time, Victor and Clerval are on opposite ends of the humanity spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, now, uh, I love how the chapter ends, because it ends with this wonderful ode to Clerval. Clerval, my
Mm-hmm.
beloved friend, and then it just goes on about how wonderful this guy is, how he's overflowing with friendship and affection, and he was devoted, and all of these wonderful things. And then in the next paragraph, Dr. Frankenstein continues, and where does he now exist? Is this loving or gentle and lovely being lost forever? Has his mind so replete with ideas, imaginations, fanciful and magnificent, which formed a world whose existence depended on the life of its creator? Has this mind perished? Does it now only exist in my memory? No, it is not thus. Your form is so divinely wrought and beaming with beauty has decayed, but your spirit still visits and consoles your unhappy friend. Yeah. Spoiler alert, Clerval is
Yeah.
going to die.
Dun dun
Right?
dun.
Right? Yeah. You don't even get to hear about the death here, but you know he's going to die. But it's interesting too, because Shelley brings up this idea of, well, what happens after death, right?
And this is this is like point number 2 of our spiral down towards Disney theology. Last chapter was love conquers all. And this chapter is, well, he's with me in my thoughts. He's with me in my spirit. It's this
Uh-huh. If I just
kind of this,
remember him, he's still alive in my heart.
yeah, it's kind of like, the thing that keeps us alive is the good vibrations of the Beach Boys or something like that. It's just really unfortunate that that's where this goes. But I can't say that I know that Shelley realizes this, but it's an amazing commentary that this is Victor's worldview when everything else is so distorted that he thinks this is how life works itself out.
Yeah, I think these are the stories people tell themselves to make themselves feel better, but they're not
Oh.
based in any reality. They're not based in truth.
Well, it's a secular version of moralistic therapeutic deism, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
It's I need to tell this to me to feel better. And for Victor, it goes back to the guilty conscience again. I need to tell this to myself to make myself feel better because I am the cause of his impending death.
Right. Right. And so so you got a couple things. First is, if there is no God, then there is no life after death. There is no resurrection. And so we have to make up stories of, but they're still alive in our hearts. They're still alive in our memories. As long as we remember them, they're still alive, which that is not the Christian worldview, right? That is not the way that God has created things. The other thing is guilt. He has no way of dealing with his guilt. So he has to make up a story to make himself feel better, because there is no forgiveness for that guilt. And what we have in Christ is, there is a promise of resurrection life. There is the promise that after death, believers have that everlasting life that awaits. There is resurrection life that awaits. There is forgiveness for the guilt that we have. So you take Christ out of the picture, and people have to fill that with something. And what they fill it with is
Yeah, you have to.
gobbledygook. It's
Yeah.
nothingness. It's vanity.
You have to generate hope where there is no hope.
Right.
And it just becomes an emotionalism that
Mhm.
doesn't actually satisfy or comfort.
Right. Right. And there's no substance to it, but you can't admit it out loud. You can't admit that, because it's too scary. It's
And and that's the very next paragraph after he finishes his ode to Clerval and his preview of his death. It's just a short paragraph. He says, "Pardon this gush of sorrow. These ineffectual words are but a slight tribute to the unexampled worth of Henry, but they soothe my heart, overflowing with the anguish which his remembrance creates."
right.
He knows it's just
Mm-hmm.
wishful thinking, but whatever helps me get through this until, again, all he has left is to sear his conscience. All he has left is to do is to let that distance not help him feel worse. And that's what the chapter opened with, as he was, putting off, he was delaying, uh, holding up his end of the bargain with the creature. And so he's walking in the woods and he's getting his joy and his vigor and his vitality back. and then he, little things remind him that he made a deal with the devil and he's got to
Hmm.
pay up on it. And the same thing happens with Clerval. He's
Yeah.
like, well, if I'm effusive in my memory and praise of Clerval, that'll help me get through until I don't feel bad about this anymore.
Yeah. It's sad. It really is sad
It's really sad.
because it's a life that is hopeless. And the reality is we have hope in Christ. And so that's one of the things that you see is so missing from Frankenstein, and it's so missing from so many in our culture today. One of the reasons that people live, you know, hopeless lives is because they have forsaken the hope that we have in Christ.
This is even a repeated theme in fiction. You will immediately know if you're reading a book where there is no concept of the gospel.
Yeah.
You immediately realize this. I mean, uh, as much as people might disagree with me, Dickens's writing is just like this,
Mm.
where you overcome your odds by morality or moralism. Um, the one that the most recent one, at least that I'm familiar with in popular culture, this is exactly the universe of the Hunger Games. There is no concept of forgiveness. There is no concept of grace. There is no concept of gospel. And it's the same thing here in Frankenstein. Frankenstein has no hope of redemption, no hope of forgiveness. He needs to make it right. And it's the whole thing. He's the one who needs to make it right.
As you say that, I was thinking about Lovecraft, and Lovecraft is I don't find it enjoyable reading at all because it is entirely hopeless. But it plays out this worldview honestly. It looks at things as if there is no hope. That he refuses to indulge those fictional stories, and so he looks at things and he sees the bleakness, and he brings that forth, and it's true for that worldview, how bleak and how despairing it is. um but you read that, and it is just, it's dark, and
It's
there's no hope.
uh the other one who's like that is Isaac Asimov. Same
Mm,
exact thing. Uh, and the only thing that keeps Isaac Asimov from being really, really dark is that in his atheistic worldview, especially if you've read the Foundation series, uh, pragmatism wins. That's the whole thing. And if anyone, I don't know if you have, if anyone's actually watched the TV series Foundation that Apple did, it's entirely nonsensical, but
mm,
they really capture the bleakness and the hopelessness of this situation.
wow.
And what's so interesting is you compare that with other fiction where there is a sense of the gospel.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not talking about like overtly Christian things like Narnia, which is absolutely there, or even Tolkien. There's a
Right.
sense of the gospel in Tolkien, but
Right.
even like in Alexander Dumas, like if you've read, The Count of Monte Cristo works that way. Dumas, did he do Les Miserables? Is that Dumas too? I
No,
can't
no,
remember. No,
that's
no, no. Hugo.
Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
there's
at
a
that
sense of the
point in his
gospel in
life
Les
anyway, there
Miserables
is
too.
that sense of the gospel in that. Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it
And
absolutely
and
shapes the worldview and the themes.
in the themes and the redemption arc, you like
Right.
the outcome for
Right.
Jean Valjean's character, or
Yeah.
like in the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
what the secular world doesn't grasp is that Frodo fails,
Mm,
but there's a redemption arc, and again, I really don't have a vested interest in angering the Tolkien purists. Uh,
uh,
but the movie captured that really well. The
mm,
final scene in Mount Doom, you know, Frodo fails,
yeah.
but there's a redemption arc,
Yeah.
right? And it's not redemption through the law. It's
Right.
not
It,
that he triumphed.
right. Right.
And and that's what's missing in Frankenstein, and that's what's missing in all these secular humanist uh their conception of fiction and virtue and things, is that there's no gospel, there's no
Mm,
redemption arc.
yeah.
uh and we should pay attention to that as Christians, and we should appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should give thanks that we do have hope. We should rejoice in the reality that we have a better story, a true story, that there is hope for those who have fallen. There is forgiveness for those who have sinned. There is resurrection life for those who die in Christ. So we live in hope and not in despair. And I think that's a good place for us to leave it. Okay. So we'll pick it up. We'll pick it up there next time on the Word and the Works. He gone.